Big Indian, this ashram, this center, is a hard place. I knew it the first time I came here. We had a small caravan of cars coming up here in 1970, following Rudy, who was coming to look at this for the first time. He wanted an ashram in the Catskills, in the mountains, somewhere, in order to have a place for his teacher to teach when he came to America. It was Swami Muktananda. And Steve, Greg Brodsky's cousin, had found this place, said it was a great deal, and the level of excitement leaving New York City on the ride up here was enormous. The idea that Rudy was expanding to have something like this as a place to honor his teacher was a really powerful idea. But he also told me privately at one point that he really got this place for Roz and Earl Benson because they needed to get out of the city and they needed a place where they could find their core identity, and somehow the city wasn't doing it for them. But I'm sure he talked to a lot of people about a lot of reasons that he got Big Indian. And when we got up here, we pulled down this Lost Clove Road, and we looked at this dilapidated old hotel with an empty swimming pool, the paint peeling all over the sides. This building was standing and had not been used in many years. And I looked at all of this and I said, oh my God, who is going to put all of this together? And then it hit me, we are. Who else? Who else is going to do the work? And I froze. I mean, nothing in me had ever understood when Rudy called this practice work, that it would actually turn into something called manual labor, and in ways that none of us were prepared for. We were all city kids. None of us had done the kind of work that this place needed to have done. And as you walk through the rooms of this place, you see old mattresses on the floor and levels of dead flies this high, this thick, on the floor, on the windowsills. Everywhere you looked were dead flies and cobwebs and a sense of decay. And I thought, there's no way this will happen. And I'm walking through it in a state of kind of fear and despair. And I look at Rudy, and he was wide-eyed with joy. Total pleasure. He was so happy with this place. He thought he had found heaven on earth. And I knew I had a long way to go to get to that perspective, because it was so hard and so laden with effort to make this come about. And we had a summer really to prepare for Muktananda's arrival, and it needed all hands on deck, and there were a fair number of us who made the trek up here and started just spending the summer up here getting it together. And Blanche and I were among the first people. We got a really nice room. I could point out where it was, but it's not quite there anymore. and we just got up every morning, and we just worked and worked and worked every day. And we did things we had never done. We did plastering and wallboard and sweeping and cleaning and dusting and carrying old mattresses out, and then we got new mattresses that came into play. And it was just extraordinary. We started watching a transformation of a very decrepit space, and it became something absolutely beautiful. May not be exactly the right word, because it doesn't look a lot different than it looks right now, but it was inhabitable, it was clean, it was a place that allowed for an enormous amount of energy expansion. We would all, by working here, by being here, We would break ourselves down every day and grow. Rudy's talks in those days were all about growing. Growing was the whole key. And growing meant overcoming all of your resistance. And if you wanted to see your resistance in play, come to Big Indian. Because everything was like, I don't want to do that. But who else was going to do it? Nobody else was going to do it. It was us. It was the team of people who came up here and said, okay. And we jumped in with a kind of fervor, and it was really thrilling. And then Calvin Holt and Stephen Bruce they had a restaurant in New York. Calvin isn't with us anymore, but Stephen has it, called Serendipity, big wonderful restaurant. And they would cook these elaborate meals while we worked. And then Rudy finally said, this is not about eating. This is not about eating. Rice and dal. We're going to get down to very simple food, and we're just going to do the effort. And there was very little relief. The only relief from the effort was class. And we would have class in the morning, and we would have class in the late afternoon. And I used to find the class in the late afternoon was amazing. And it was amazing because I had no energy to resist it. I was so broken down, I was so tired, I was so worn out. I said, and I just sat here. I barely worked, really. I barely did the exercise. I just kind of sat, and the energy just filled me and filled me and filled me and filled me. And I was going, what is this? Why is the energy coming so strongly when I'm just at the end of the day, rather than when I was starting out the day trying to fill myself with energy? And part of it was, energy is here, basically, to do one thing: break us down. What does it mean, break us down? It means there's a part of you that is in the way. And mostly in our culture, it's labeled the ego, or the ego mind. And the ego mind builds itself very, very slowly as a little baby. It becomes me, mine, all about me, my, I. It just becomes this unbelievably powerful force. And it is a force that starts to define life by what I like and what I don't like. And after a while, it is purely a pleasure seeker. I want this, I want that, I don't want this, I don't want that, give me, give me, give me. And it's really a kind of ugly force if you look at it under any sort of clear-eyed vision. It's not a we force. It's not a thy will be done force. It's not filled with light and love and God's energy. It's filled with self, individual, personal self. And it has to be gotten rid of. Why? Well, let me put it in a very simple sense. You don't leave this world with it. You leave the world, and all that has to get stripped away. And I've talked about this in other talks, but if you decide to wait to the last minute of your life to drop your ego, those of you who've been doing this now for 50 years or whatever length of time we've been here, 40, 20, however many years you're here, you know it ain't easy. Your ego doesn't want to be dropped very much. Basically what it wants is to find a new definition of itself that makes you feel better about it. And that new definition often is spiritual. I'm spiritual. Now I'm beautiful. Now I'm wonderful. I'm such a perfect person. I'm a good person. I'm full of energy. I care about other people. I'm a very unique, extraordinary being. That too has to be completely wiped away. Everything that you identify with as separate from everything else is the problem. And if you have to do that on your deathbed, in the last milliseconds of your life, it is not going to be pretty or easy. And all of you who are looking at your own life with any kind of honesty are watching your holding patterns. You're watching the part of you that doesn't want to let go. You may not have identified it with those terms, but that's what you're looking at. And when you sit to meditate, a lot of you have been doing this a long time. My guess is there are certain patterns that you have adopted already over the course of time. You sit down and you feel this, you do that little maneuver, you do that little thing, you relax this, you do that, and you find your little place of comfort. You go, okay. And that's kind of where you sit for the class. Some of you feel more comfortable, some of you feel a little less comfortable. Some of you have these little minds that go on and attack you and go, you're not real, you're a fake, you're not whatever you think you are, you're a pretender, whatever your stuff is that goes on. Another part of you may sit there and go, oh my God, you're so wonderful, you made this whole trip to Big India and today you're such a good person. But whatever it is, it's just building and building and building you. And what is wanted ultimately is for this structure that you have created that has your name on it and has your mind reinforcing it on a moment-to-moment basis, you want to rip it out. You can dissolve it slowly if you want. You can scrub it away, but mostly it has to go. And when Rudy said this is a life's work, he meant it takes a lifetime to pull this off for those of you who are willing to do the work, who don't get to a place where you go, I've done enough. Because there's no such thing. What's wanted is this extraordinary surrender. Rudy used that word endlessly. Surrender. What does it mean to surrender? Surrender what to what? What are you surrendering? Well, in the simplest terms, you're surrendering this me and mine to thou. You're letting go of your own individual need and will to something greater. And are you doing that? Ask yourself, are you really doing that? Well, I'll tell you this, every one of you got in a car this morning and made an enormous journey to come up here. Rudy said once that the journey to your meditation is your meditation. That's your class. The effort you make to get here is it. Most people, when they're here, they're sitting here going, I'm trying to surrender. I want to surrender. Oh, let me surrender. Why isn't that doesn't feel right. What am I supposed to be doing? All this craziness that goes on in the brain, thinking, am I there yet? Or why do I feel tense? Or what am I doing wrong? Or why can't I get there? Or just cycling around in the same old bullshit, basically, over and over and over. That stuff is ridiculous. The real stuff was the ride here, which was very simple, quiet, open, loving, saying, I'm coming for something greater. And then my discovery years ago was that the real class was brunch. Whenever we sat around having brunch after the class, everybody was relaxed, they're eating, Rudy was joking, we'd sit around. It was so open, and I'd feel fuller and fuller and fuller of joy, the joy of just being. On the other hand, this sitting that we do in stillness for however long it is, and forgive me if this was longer than some of you are used to, a long class, a sitting, has a kind of a cycle to it for many people. The beginning is kind of open, I'm here, you kind of tune in, I'm ready. You begin this opening, you feel, if you're lucky, all of your chakras open, and you feel really wonderful. And then somewhere in the 15-20 minute mark, you kind of hear the brain going a little bit. And if you can, you kind of let go of that. But for a lot of people, it starts to come into the picture. And some of it has to do with my back hurts, or my legs falling asleep, or why isn't he done already? or if I'm looking at somebody here, they're waiting for the moment I'll look up at them. You have it all programmed. If he's here, he'll be with me soon, and you're getting more and more ready for that. And if I switch over to the other side of the room, it's like, oh my God, he's looking at me. He's looking at me. And then there's this horrible ego identity with, oh, am I ready? Am I? This is the energy now, and I've got to really be there. And then there's this trying, and trying is just tension. It's just tension. So you're totally in the way of yourself. You're in the way of the experience. And so when you're in the way of the experience just locks in, and I sit there working with your tension. But the great thing is, that tension is the exact thing that has to be gotten rid of. So in a way, the fact that you've created tension in that moment, you've got, oh, me, he's looking at me, the I thing, really full force. The fact that you are presenting that is exactly what's needed to get rid of. So in a way, it's a good thing, because you're so self-conscious at that moment. That self-consciousness is what you need to work with in your practice. And how do you work with it? Well, you can say, oh my God, I can't stand it, I'm no good, why is he looking at me, why can't I get out of the way, why have I always done this, why do I do this all the time, blah, 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 blah. I mean, I'm throwing a lot of stuff out here, some of it will register, some won't. But all I can say is that thing finally gets very boring. And it becomes repetitive. If you're in your 50th year of doing this and that's going on, and there's no reason why it wouldn't, you know, the repetitiveness of that is just really, really disturbing. And so what happens is you start to think of yourself as a failed meditator, a failed student. But if I keep coming to class, if I keep doing this, maybe one day it will happen. So something in the future will finally break apart and I will be there. But the argument that I've been making with all of you for the last 4 years or so is that nothing you're looking for is in the future. Nothing. It's only here. It's only in this moment. And often in your meditation, something happens toward the end of it. If you're not sitting there in total squirming misery with your back and your knees and everything else, something happens. You just go, oh, you let go. You surrender. I can't do this. And then, without even knowing it, you're there. You're there. The struggle went into this moment of going, I give up. And that's it. That's really the key in your meditation. The moment where you just say, I give up. You just be. It's not trying to get anywhere. It's not judging yourself for not being there. It's not effort. It's not anything. It's just. Now the mind has a wonderful way of coming back into that. But if you can bring yourself into that place over and over, there's a certain still-pointedness, there's a certain silence, there's a certain quiet that emerges. And what happens in that quiet is that this voice that comes into you really rises very much at the bottom of your chakra system. It's very low. Your thoughts kind of come up. We don't always feel that way because we're usually aware of them when they're playing in the brain, but they rise up. And as they rise up, you can, if you're very quiet and very observant, see the thoughts starting to happen and then just go, no, 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 no. And they don't get born. They don't happen. The thought that's about to rise into your head doesn't manifest. And there you are in this beautiful state of, no, no, no. Then you don't even have to say no. You just go. And then you're in stillness. You're in this beautiful place of being. If you don't stay aware, and that doesn't mean conscious and aware, it just means aware. There's no thought. And if it does come up, you just let it pass. Just like a cloud goes in front of the sun, and then it goes away. You just go, oh. And you're in a state, it's not ecstasy, it's not bliss. Can be, but it's not necessarily. It's just being. It's being what is. And what is? The water running past us outside, people around us in the room, this amazing statue behind me, the light that's coming into the room, the feeling of being in a shared space with each other, all of that's just there. That's arriving at yourself. That is 2 minutes or 5 minutes or an hour's worth of release from you, from this ego-minded, self-serving character that plays out in your brain over and over. And the reason we gather together and share this moment is because it feels so good, and the collective experience of it is so rich. The Sangha, the gathering together in the name of the self, the support that we bring to each other by working together is so amazing that it doesn't occur anywhere else. The closest you get to it is a ball game where there's one-pointedness, where everyone's looking at the ball. For a moment, self is oneness. You know, watching a soccer game, a football game, we're all connected. Even kind of in a movie or even in a concert sometimes. The melody is carrying us all as one, and that oneness is really expressive of a kind of profound truth. That this stillness in us, this self that we discover, is not ours, it's everyone's. It's the self out of which we all spring. And we spring from it not at birth, but instant to instant. We are present in that self. And when you are in your ego mind, you forget. And that's all you do. You just forget. You're not in yourself. You're just completely lost in the miasma of your own brain stuff. So here you are, sitting in yourself for however long you get, and it's the greatest thing in the world. It's worth the ride to begin in. It's worth every effort you have to go to meditate whenever you sit to meditate. And the extraordinary thing about sitting in meditation every day, as Rudy recommended, is that in good days and bad days, in sweet days and sour days, you're there watching how this thing works. And you watch how it works, and you begin to understand the patterns of resistance, the patterns of delusion. You start to see who you are. But you also can begin to find a way of deluding yourself that any of this is a problem. In other words, you can keep falling back on who you were rather than who you are. And that falling back on who you were is a trap. It's a terrible trap, and most people don't know they're doing it. But I, as a teacher, get to watch all of you. So I get to see your patterns over a course of a very long period of time, and I get to see how you go backward, or how you get sloppy, let's say, or how you let your old voices take over. And if I had the power to sit with you every day and go, stop it already, enough already. You know, don't do that anymore. That would be great. But I don't, and it's not my style. You know, it's not how I do it. So what happens here is a very slow winnowing down. And some of you are participating in that process with real effort, and some of you are dallying and have been dallying for a long time. What I love about Big Indian and the energy of Big Indian, what I hate about Big Indian, but I love about it, is that it's hard. And that means this is a place that doesn't let you get away with anything. If you sat in class today, and I sensed a lot of you were going through this, and you were going, this is hard. This class is hard today. Why is it hard? Why do I have to work harder than I normally work? Why isn't it just flowing? Or whatever it is your mind was sort of telling you, it's because it's Big Indian. And it's hard here. I don't know why it's hard, but the energy is heavy. It's dense. And that's kind of like a dark definition of it. But a better definition of it is it's Shiva. It's Shiva energy. Shiva energy is Rudra energy. Rudra, Rudy's name, Swami name, Rudrananda, the love of the dark side of Shiva, the destroyer. Shiva is the destroyer, but the crazy wild side of Shiva is Rudra. And Rudy was Rudra. So we come up here, this is his home territory. This is where he makes your ego rise right up and then shoots it, slaughters it, if he can. Doesn't mean that you won't try to bring it back, but he will slaughter it. And my experience of being up here was that I was slaughtered on a daily basis. I truly, I have never had more pain in my life than I've had at Big Indian. And I can recount some of these moments. They were really powerful. The first job Rudy gave me here was he gave me a little trowel, about so big, and Blanche, and there were a number of us, and he said, go into the pool, which was now empty, and completely paint all over the place that was dried up and wrinkled and crackled, and he said, scrape it. And it was like, I couldn't think of a worse job. You could barely get the paint off. And if you got a solid 2 feet of paint off in a whole day, you had done something amazing. But you looked at the whole pool and it was nothing. It was so much more. It was so much work to get the paint off that pool. And there were, I mean, Rudy would, everything I did here, Rudy would knock me down for. And it was amazing. I was once, I had offered to cook dinner here. Even Blanche doesn't let me cook dinner. You know, but Rudy didn't ask, I offered to cook dinner. And I was making a bechamel sauce. I'd never made a bechamel sauce. And I'm doing it my way. And what happens is I'm doing it, and Rudy walks in, and this bechamel sauce had become a clump of something. And he said, "You idiot! What do you think you're doing?" He said, "Why don't you ever follow directions? You don't know how to follow directions. You always do it your own way, and you always mess up." He went on, and I was getting more and more and more tense, and I was like just being turned into a little nothing. And when that was all over, he said, "Don't you put 1 ounce of this tension in this dinner. Either you put love in this dinner, or we're not eating it." So I had to start loving the bechamel sauce. And I don't know how it happened, but it suddenly turned into the most amazing bechamel sauce. And then I went into the pantry, and I got all of these canned beans to to add to the meal. And he walks in again. He says, "What are you doing with canned food?" He said, "This is summer. It's growing in the garden. You don't open canned food in the summer. You open canned food in the winter." So it was too late. So we had some canned beans, and then we went in the garden and picked some stuff. But this is how Rudy taught me, and everything I did here was wrong. And it was wrong in ways that made me go on this roller coaster ride of, I'm enlightened, I'm the worst person ever, I'm enlightened, I'm a horrible, horrible human being. And I didn't know what to do with that. And then Rudy had a puja here once. And I don't remember all the dates of this, but it was a big puja, meaning a fire ceremony. And we built a fire pit that was about 30 foot in diameter. And we put logs and trees that we had torn down from all over the property into this pit. And then we're having this big ceremony, and we're all walking around, and people are taking off their clothes to throw into the fire pit. I'm going, what's that? I wasn't going to take off my clothes, to walk around a fire pit. It was really bizarre experience. And so I took off a pair of socks that I loved, and I threw it in, and it only landed in the dirt. It didn't even get into the fire, so it wasn't consumed at all. And I felt awful. Then it starts to rain, and I go, well, this is the worst ever. Because we were walking around in the rain, and the rain stopped, and we kept walking around and meditating and chanting, and then it rained again, and then we're meditating more, and we took off his shirt and threw it in the fire, and everybody's taking off their shirts, and I wasn't going to take off my shirt. But I took up another sock, and it also fell onto the side, so it didn't get burned. And then it rains again, and then the ceremony's over. And I'm going, this was the worst experience I've ever had. I was freezing now because the fire was starting to die down, and it's raining, and we're wet. And I remember going back into my room thinking, what a horrible, horrible thing that was. But on my way to the room, actually, there was a woman named Draupadi. John, do you remember Draupadi? She was so great. She was a student of Muktananda's. And she was standing there, and she was sobbing. And I went, why are you crying? Why are you crying? And she said, I can't have an Indian accent. You have to understand, she said, in India, in a fire puja, a puja that is truly blessed, it rains 3 times. She says it has never happened that anyone knows in modern time. So what they do in India is they take water and they sprinkle it on the fire 3 times to simulate the rain. But here it rained 3 times. And it was a blessing. And I was misperceiving everything. and then Rudy said, while he was watching the fire, these huge, monstrous beings came out of the fire. I don't see beings coming out of the fire. I don't see anything. I've never seen visions. And he said these beings were ancient and blessing this land. And I thought, wow, it's a blessed land, and one day I will grow to see visions, and I will grow to feel the blessing of Big Indian. Well, I've never seen visions, and to this minute I don't understand the blessings of Big Indian, except for it is Shiva doing its work. It is breaking you down. It's breaking me down. It shows you who you are not, if you will, by showing you who you think you are. Who you think you are, for most people, is not something you want to be. One of the great things about Shiva, and if you want to understand deathbed experience, because many people call meditation the practice of dying. The practice of dying is facing Shiva. Facing Shiva is the God who will dismantle you. And the you that is dismantled is all of your false notions, all of your self-aggrandizement, everything that makes you think you're special in any way whatsoever, whether it's spiritual or the worst person in the world, it will take it all away, and it does not take it away gently. Because if you're in the final moments of your life, it can't spare anything. It will not spare you at all. You will be completely unraveled. And it's horrible. And for most people, it's called hell. That's what the journey is. The only way not to go to hell is to, in a sense, either do this kind of work that we're doing and let go of stuff completely and continually until there's nothing to let go of, or to be so committed to this journey that when they come to take you away, whatever that is, you go, yes, yes. As opposed to, because that little has to be worked out. It has to be taken away. You can't have to God, but. The word but doesn't exist. God does not listen to your but. But I had a hard life. But I lost my best friend. Blah, 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 blah. It doesn't. None of that matters. Everything that a human being goes through is known to Shiva, and he's going to free you of all of that by taking it all away. But to you, it's your most precious thing. Your memory of something or someone is more precious than anything, and so you can't let it go. But that thing that you're holding on to and clinging to that defines you is the exact thing you have to let go of. And if you want to see what that thing is, come to Big Indian. Because it will rise up and you will see it. And you will go, oh, and then you don't want to come to Big Indian. And I'm using Big Indian in a very specific sense and also in a kind of metaphorical sense. Because we think the stuff that comes up that's so awful in us, or so repetitive, or so dramatic, that we can't face it or let go of it, we think of it as a punishment to have to face these things in ourselves. The fact that we had terrible childhoods, or the fact that we had, we lost somebody who we loved very deeply, or whatever it is, the fact that you never got what you wanted in life. These become our identities, and they come up, and they're so painful. They're so painful that we go, no, and most of us want a spiritual life so we don't have to look at that stuff. But the truth is, the whole purpose of a spiritual life is to look at that stuff. It's to look at it and go, okay, I accept what is. I accept you. I accept the totality of myself. And that acceptance is surrender. That surrender is forgiving everything in your life that made you who and what you are. And it's not like you have to literally pull it out You just have to let it be. Just be you. Accept the totality of you with all of your failings and all of your ambition and all of your noise and all of your hostilities and all this greed and stuff that we have, and just go, yep, I get it. I get it. And you just look at it all, you observe it all, and you go, I am what you made. You know, I am what I am. The beauty of that is the beginning of the weakening of the density of the fabric. It starts to loosen up, starts to get pulled apart. And you become freer and freer and freer of yourself. And you do it not by fighting it and not by chopping it into a million pieces, by accepting it and surrendering to it. That's the secret. That's the practice. And when do you do it? Now. You don't say, I'll do it this afternoon, or I'll do it when I meditate tomorrow, or maybe I'll become such a strong meditator that in 5 years I'll be able to pull this off. No. It's now. It's right now. And what part of you do you accept right now? The part that's with you right now. What's coming up right now is all that matters. And it's a brilliant system. The stuff rises up exactly when you need it to. And you find, oh, this. And you go, I surrender. This. I surrender. Ooh, that. I surrender. And you keep doing that, and you keep doing that, and you keep doing that. And then what happens, and I've talked about this before, the awakening or the enlightenment or satori or whatever you want to call it, there comes a moment where you've done this for a very long time and you've gotten rid of a lot of stuff. And then this moment comes and suddenly there's no you left. Done. Now, I've talked about this a lot. Some of that little you starts to work its way back. And it starts to come back, and it starts to be old patterns and old thoughts come back in the middle of this vast awareness of being. But instead of going, oh, that's terrible, you go, of course, why not? As long as I'm alive, as long as there's a body, as long as there's a personality and a mind, why should it not be there? But it is not the totality. It's a tiny little drop in the ocean of being, and that's what we're all working for. Every one of us sits here, especially in Big Indian, and allows these big things to come up, and these big things to be accepted, and these big things to be forgiven and surrendered, and they fall away. Or if they don't fall away, it doesn't matter because you're not fighting it. Or you're not defining yourself with it. It's just there, and you go, okay. And this huge okay occurs, and there you are, okay with what is. And I mean with what is on the tiniest scale and on the largest scale. And you're free. You're free. And that freedom from being at war with yourself is complete. You're no longer fighting this thing of every day going, what's wrong with me, or why didn't I get, or why didn't that happen, or whatever it is. It's just not there. And this thing of seeking the thing that will finally give it to you, seeking the answer, seeking something down the road stops. Because there's nothing to be found. There's nothing to be found. You are that thing right now. You are that right now. And I know, I hear in your minds, I see it in your eyes, the but. How? But. I can't, this part can't be that. No, it can. That horrible thing that you can't let go of is part of it. It's essential to it. There is no but. There's only yes. There's only this enormous acceptance of your truth. And your truth is absolute. Your truth has all the beauty and all the ugliness, all the light and all the dark. It's all the yin-yang of your being. And only when you say yes to the yin-yang of your being are you free. You're no longer seeking for it to be something else, someone to deliver you into whatever it is. Those of you who are looking for ecstasy and bliss, I will tell you this, it comes sometimes. It actually comes sometimes. You'll be driving in the car, you'll be meditating, and suddenly you will be filled with ecstasy and bliss. Does it last forever? No. Is it supposed to? I don't know. I don't think so. I've never seen anything last forever. You know, you may want to say that once your body is gone, you'll be completely in a state of ecstasy and bliss. We'll find out. We'll find out. But for the time being, what arises is. What manifests is. So say yes to what manifests. Or if you want to do a dance with it, if you want to say no, if you want to say that's not appropriate, tell it that. Say no. Consciously. Say no. I'm not going to take a thought that's going to carry me 5 million miles away and leave me in a state of desire and unhappiness. I will not take that ride. You can do that. Just go no. Yes, no. You suddenly are living a very conscious life. A life of surrender. It's what we're here trying to do. That's all this is. We're trying to live a life, a meditative life that allows us to discover the core of who we are and how to say yes to everything else. You know, when I hug you guys, I'm not hugging the part of you that's really nice part, the part of you that's sweet, the part of you that's open. I'm hugging the totality of you. Because that's the only way you will be loved. Those of you who want to be loved for your openness and your spirituality, great. But I know that's not the whole of you. And the love is for all the failings and all the problems and all the struggle. And that's how we want to be loved, truly. We want to be loved for who we are, not who we should be or who we could be or who we pretend to be. Who are you? Figure that out. And I know this goes on, you know me, I just go on and on. But I will tell you, there's only one path in spiritual life. There's only one path, and it's your path. Nobody else's. You cannot go on my path. If you end up on my path and you come to the end of it, you will have come to the end of my path, not your path. You've got to figure out what your path is, and you've got to be strong, and you've got to be willing and committed. You don't have to, but if you're here, clearly there's something in you that wants that. Follow it out and do it dynamically. Do it with passion. Do it with effort. Make the commitment to go all the way. What is all the way? Where does it take you? Right here. This is it. The whole journey takes you here. And what do you do with here? You just go, thy will be done. End of talk. We're going to do another class this afternoon. I've never done that. Rudy used to do it all the time, like I said. And so we'll have brunch now. During the talk this afternoon, if you guys have questions, I'm happy to answer them. After the brunch, if some of you would clean up, help with the cleanup, that would be great. It shouldn't be just Blanche, or it shouldn't be Michael and Julia. You know, there's help needed. And then to kind of be in consort with the work ethic of Big Indian, there's so much work to be done here. Right here, yeah. So after lunch, let's get together, and I think Capella, John, whoever wants it, George, whoever has a sense of what needs to get done, let's get together and just do the work. We have cleaning to do, sweeping to do, probably a lot more than that. But whatever it is, let's leave this place cleaner and prettier and shinier than it was when we arrived today. And if you're feeling resistance to that, like, you know, you didn't come for that, you know, I get it. I mean, I did mention in my email, go up to the shrine and you can sit at the shrine for a while. But the only time I ever saw Rudy really get pissed was when a friend of mine actually was up here, and we were doing a work afternoon, and this friend went and hid out in the woods. And Rudy knew it. And he was so angry. And I could tell this guy was never going to get what he needed from Rudy, because he wasn't being real. He was following his own private agenda and thought, well, I can get away with it. Yes, of course you can get away with it, but not with Rudy. Couldn't get away with it. And so, let's just we'll do a couple hours of work, and then we'll have a class, and then, those of you who are going back to wherever you're going back to, have a wonderful ride, and thank you for making the effort to come up here, because God knows it's wonderful that you do that. And those of you who are here later, we'll go out to dinner somewhere. We're talking about going into Phoenicia. Is it Phoenicia? And Brio's is a restaurant. I had lunch there the other day. It's got pizza and it's got everything. It's big menu, so we can go there. And if you're staying the night, great. And I'll be here tomorrow morning at 11, and we'll do this again for whoever's still here. And there's no guilt if you were leaving. There's no guilt ever. Just, it's wonderful that you are here at all. And go on with your day. And tomorrow we'll do 2 classes again. And then I'm flying back to Seattle for a couple weeks, and then moving to San Rafael. So, but I love that we're here, and I love that you guys made the effort. And I really do sympathize if you found this hard today. It's good hard, and it will always be good hard, and we're all blessed by that. Thank you.